You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Tim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have John Searles on the show with me. He has an amazing new book. It's called Her Last Affair. And guys, you know that I love a great thriller and a great psychological suspense story. And this book is, I'm going to put it this way. John, I love a book that when you finish reading it, it kind of ruins you from reading anything else for a while, because those characters just won't leave you alone. They just linger in your head, and you keep thinking about them, and you try to start a new book, and you just can't leave these characters alone. Her Last Affair absolutely is one of those books. I love it so much. I'm giving this book away to as many people as I can, and I know you're going to love it too. Welcome to the show.
Oh, Hank, it's an honor to be here, and I'm so grateful to you for saying that, because I work so hard on these characters and on my books, and I put so much of my heart and soul into them. So to hear that kind of praise from a reader like you means the world to me. So thank you.
It's absolutely true. John, we've got so much to chat about today, but before we do, we begin each show with the same question, and we have to get this out of the way before we can move on. And that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
What is my first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller? For as long as I could remember, I wanted to be a writer. And I remember my mother had a book of wallpaper swatches, like one of those kind of big chunky books with samples of wallpaper swatches. And I used to pick the patterns I liked best, glue them to cardboard, bind them with duct tape, fill them with construction paper, and write stories inside that then I would try to sell to my family for 25 cents a story. So I was both a writer and a publisher from an early age, and I actually still have one of those. It's so frail and fragile, this book, from when I was a little kid. It sits on my shelf, and so I'd say that's my earliest memory. And I actually shared on my Instagram recently, I found a little movie clip of me as a kid walking around with a pad and paper, writing frantically, just walking around the house writing. So I think I came out of the womb wanting to be a writer.
I love that so much. John, I hear stories from people all the time that have these early realizations that they have the storytelling gene, or however that happens to people. But more often than not, it's a circuitous route that people take from that early recollection or realization to, them finally writing the book that they want to, publishing it, getting it out to the world. Was this a straight through path for you, or were there other stops along the way?
There were many stops along the way. My father was a cross-country truck driver, and my mom ran a small driving school with her sister. So a lot of driving, really good at driving. A lot of driving in my blood. But no one in my family had even gone to college, never mind become a writer. It just seemed so far flung a dream, from what the life we lived. And so even though I wanted to become a writer, I just didn't know how. And when I got out of high school, my parents got me a job at a factory, the DuPont factory in Newtown, Connecticut. We all know Newtown from sadly the school shooting, but this was many, many years before, when Newtown was a little rural town, and they had the DuPont factory there, and I worked there. And I didn't really fit in, but I did my best. And I just, again, didn't know how to become a writer, but I started going to state college at night. I saved my money. I worked nights as a telemarketer, weekends as a stock boy. And I saved my money and went to a small states college. I commuted, and I lived in my parents' garage, because we only had 2 bedrooms, 4 kids. My grandfather lived with us. It was chaos in our house. But I built a little, saved money and built a little bedroom in my parents' garage, and I commuted to school, and I majored in business because thought it was practical, even though I cannot even add or subtract or do any math. It was horrible. It was the wrong major for me. But I minored in creative writing, and I had a poetry teacher, Vivian Shipley, is her name, at the school, who really saw something in me. And we all know the importance of a mentor and a teacher. And
Absolutely.
she encouraged me, and I began writing at first poems and a little bit of fiction, but I still didn't know how to do it, how to make that a reality. And then sadly, my younger sister passed away after her senior prom. She went to her senior prom and she died not long after, which
Oh,
was,
I'm so sorry.
thank you. It was the horrible tragedy that fell upon my family, and we miss her still. But in the aftermath of that, I always say, I realize, and I know writers aren't supposed to use cliches, but I always say I use one when I tell the story, that I realize that life is short, as we know.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I always wanted to be a writer, and I saw how tenuous and fragile life is. So I thought, this is what I want to really do with my life. So I ended up double majoring in English and business, and then I applied to NYU, and I won some writing awards at college. I applied to NYU. I got in. I got a partial scholarship, and my father at that time was bringing in Broadway show sets. As I said, he was a cross-country truck driver, but he got a job working for this ugly era trucking, which used to bring show sets around the country for show tours. He was bringing in the set of Kiss of the Spider Woman, the musical.
Oh, yeah.
It was a giant bird cage in the back of his truck. And so I packed my clothes and garbage bags. That's my dog barking at a squirrel. I'm sorry, Ruby.
That's
She
fine.
doesn't understand interviews. But and I moved to the city, and I waited tables for 12 years and wrote. And even then, it's not I don't know how long you want me to keep going with this, Hank, but even then there's more to it, because it wasn't even then I magically got published. There were many more setbacks and twists and turns, but that was basically how I got on the path to becoming a writer, though.
You have also, you're the longtime books editor of Cosmopolitan. How did you wind up in that position?
Well, so I moved to New York, as I said. I went to NYU. I wrote a book while I was in graduate school at NYU, and I should say I had a fantastic mentor there, the novelist Anne Hood, who people I hope are aware of. She was my professor at NYU and really took me under her wing, and we're still dear friends to this day. But anyway, I wrote a book while I was working with her at NYU, and I sent it to you have to get an agent after you write a book. And I met this editor, and the editor said, "You don't need an agent, just send me the manuscript." So I sent it to her, and about a week or a month later, I get the manuscript back, and it was in a box, and I pulled the manuscript out of the box, and it's a very polite letter from the editor saying she didn't connect to the characters as much as she hoped. But then this little scrap of paper fluttered to the floor, and it was a note from an in-house reader that was mistakenly left in the manuscript. It was not meant for my eyes.
Ooh.
And it said, and I quote, "I could barely make it to page 60, and I feel really badly for anyone who has to read the whole thing."
Oh, no.
I know.
Oh, no.
Hey,
That's not how I
hey.
wanted that story to end, John.
I took to my bed. It was very dramatic. I thought I'll never write again. And it was just too painful. I was waiting tables, trying to support myself. I had no money. And, as I said, my parents, I love my mom and dad, and they just didn't understand. Like, they thought it was like what my mother would call at the time a pipe dream. Like, "You're going to become a writer." Yeah, right. It's just that we didn't know people who did things like that.
Yeah.
So I just thought, you know what, I'm not gonna write anymore. And around that time, I heard about a job reading fiction submissions for Red Book magazine for 50 cents a story. And at the time, Red Book magazine published 35. No, sorry, they published 11 stories a year, but they got 35,000 submissions, what they called the slush pile. That was the unsolicited submissions, not from an agent or anything. And so I would go up to Redbook, fill bags with short stories, and then go home. And they gave me these form letters to attach. But I felt the rejection letters, but I felt so bad after the rejection I had suffered that I would always write in the margins to people like, "Don't let your dream die. Don't give up. Keep going." And then from there, I heard about a job upstairs at Cosmo, and I went on the interview, and again, I had no money, but I bought a jacket from the Salvation Army for $12, and Aunt Hood had said to me, I said, they said, do I need a resume? She said, you're a writer. Writers don't need resumes. So I remember I went on the interview, and the woman interviewing me said, where's your resume? And I said, I'm a writer. Writers don't have resumes. Hank, I think she hired me because she felt sorry for me. But so,
Or she connected with your bravado. Who knows?
yeah, maybe that's a better way to put it. A good spin on it. But it was my first day on the job was the day of the Oj Simpson verdict. That tells you how long ago it was. I was just out of NYU, and we all went into Helen Gurley Brown. People listening, some might remember her, others will not. But she was an icon in the magazine industry, and she, made Cosmo what it was. We all went into her office to watch it, and I remember everyone was glued to the TV, but Helen was this little bird of a woman, and maybe it was 75 at the time, and had just had her breast done, and was wearing a leather mini skirt and a leopard print halter, and everyone was staring at the TV waiting for the OJ verdict, but my head was cranked around just staring at her. So and then I started slowly during that time writing again. I was cleaning under my bed. Weirdly, I don't know why, Hank, but cleaning and writing are very connected for me. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but if I'm stuck on something, I go vacuum, I wash the windows, I don't know. My mother's like a massive cleaner too. So sometimes if I'm stuck, organizing something else helps organize my thoughts. And so I was cleaning under my bed, and I heard the first sentence to a story, which was, whenever my father disappeared, we looked for him on Hanover Street. And so I thought, I'm just going to write it down. And then I went back to cleaning, and then I heard the next sentence, and I went and wrote it down. And I thought, really, that sentence was something true for my own life, because my dad, may he rest in peace, he passed 2 years ago in a motorcycle accident, actually. But when I was younger, he was quite the drinker and carouser, and had a million girlfriends. And I spent a big part of my childhood with my mom, driving around to bars or his girlfriend's house, and she would send me into the bars to get him out, or into his girlfriend's house to get him out. And so
that's not traumatizing for a kid, is it?
I know, it's just my life. I don't know. And yeah, I guess it probably wasn't the best thing, but it's just my life, and I'm grateful for it either way.
Sure,
and but I wrote that sentence down, and then I kept writing, and I thought, I'm just going to write for myself, because trying to get published is so painful and so hard, and so I'll just write this for myself. And unlike the I could barely make it to page 60 book, that book I wrote, and it sold very quickly, and a 2-book deal with HarperCollins, who is still my publisher today, and I've gone on to write many books with them. And I was lucky with that first book, Boy Still Missing, because it's weird. I'm like, I guess I'm kind of an optimist in ways, because when you have a book coming out, your publisher says, well, you have to get what's called blurbs, those quotes on the back from other writers. And they said, so do you know anyone? And I was new to publishing. I said, I don't know, let me think. I don't know him, but I'm going to write Frank McCourt and ask him. And they said, well, he just won the Pulitzer Prize. You might want to aim lower. And I said, well, I'll just write him. Maybe he'll do it. I don't know. And so I wrote him a letter, and his assistant wrote back and said, sorry, Mr. McCourt is too busy to read your book. He did just win the Pulitzer Prize. And I thought, okay, well, I tried. I always feel like you can just try in life. But then a few weeks went by, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and there was this man. I wish, Hank, I could do an Irish brogue. I'm not an actor at all, but I hear on the other end of the line this man speaking with an Irish brogue. And he says, John, this is John Searles. I say, yes. This is Frank McCourt. He said, I was leaving to go to Oregon for an event, and I need something to read on the plane, and I just grabbed your book off. It was an advanced copy off my assistant's desk, and I read the first half on the plane. Then I've been in the hotel here reading it at night, and I think it's fantastic. Can I give you some words of support? And I said, yeah. He said,
yes.
It's not too late, is it? And it was right around when they had already. I said, if it is too late, I will find a way. That is not too late. And so I grabbed a pencil.
I'll buy a billboard, something.
Yeah. Exactly, in paper. So he read me the first sentence, and I said, I was so nervous, and I said, thank you very much, Mr. McCourt, goodbye. He said, I'm not done yet. And I said, oh, sorry. And he said the next sentence, and I said, Thank you very much, Mr. McCord. Goodbye. And he said, stop trying to hang up on me. I'm not done. I'm not done yet. And then by the time he read the whole thing, Hank, I'm embarrassed to say, I'm a bit of a crybaby. I was in tears, actually. And I think he got freaked out. Like, this guy's a weirdo, because he said, you go compose yourself, young man, and I hope we meet someday. And I actually did meet him a few times before he passed away. And he was a wonderful man. And anyway, so that was how I began publishing. And then I've written, after that I wrote Strange But True, which was just made into a film a couple years ago, and a book called Help with the Haunted, and now I have my new book, Her Last Affair. So that's a little bit about that.
I love that story so much.
Thank you.
One thing that yeah, I know a lot of writers who have worked in publishing, either jobs like you had with the books editor at Cosmo, or some people will work for a publisher, maybe work in editorial, or there are lots of places where you can fit into the publishing industry without actually being a writer. And I feel like that sometimes when I talk to people, that they accept a position like that because they know they are a writer, and maybe they haven't had success yet, but plugging into the publishing industry feels like a sort of a win. Like I'm around books, I'm around storytellers, and maybe even if I haven't realized my dream yet, it's still scratching an itch, if you will, inside me by just being part of the process. And I think for some people, they kind of resign themselves to that position, and they're happy, and that's enough for them. But some people, being in the industry, in the machinery of storytelling, if you will, kind of lights a fire, and it encourages them to push on, that if all of these people that I'm around can do it, then why can't I? Did you ever have a moment like that where you're working around storytelling and around storytellers and books, and did you ever was there ever a temptation to just accept that lot, and this is, I'll be happy, I'll be satisfied by just being here? Does that make sense at all?
Well, I know exactly what you're asking. Yes, I very much do. And I noticed that with people who want to be in the film world too, and then they move to LA and they end up in a kind of a sort of tangentially connected job that's not really in film, but then it kind of feeds them and they're happy with that, which is
Right.
good for them. I would say for me, Cosmo, don't forget, I grew up, like I said, my dad was a truck driver. I grew up in Connecticut, but when people hear Connecticut, I think they have this image of everything's Greenwich and New Canaan and people sipping
Right.
scotch and playing croquet. I did not grow up in that Connecticut, but the town I grew up in at the time, now it's very suburban, but when I grew up, it was a very rural, quiet town where you had like a diner and a drive-in hamburger joint and kind of a grocery store. And now it's much more developed in like a suburb. But so I ending up at Cosmo was like Alice in Wonderland falling in the rabbit hole. Like, it was a whole new world. I had never experienced anything like it. And also, I would also say, growing up in my town, I didn't know that I was a gay man growing up. I was just didn't know I didn't fit in, and I was not athletic at all, and I was really teased and really bullied pretty terribly. And I would hide in the library all the time and read. And in the summers, my parents would send me trucking with my dad to, quote, make a man out of me. I always say they didn't get the results they wanted. But anyway, so I felt like the world was not that welcoming to me, if that makes sense. I mean, not always. I had certain friends, and I was a waiter, and at the restaurant I had friends, but customers would even come in, and like the husbands would make fun of me, like being gay, and I didn't even really know I was gay. I just was just trying to live my life. But
Yeah.
when I got to Cosmo, people were just really nice. It was a great office. It was filled with smart women. It was run by Helen Gurley Brown, and then by Bonnie Fuller, and then for many, many years, the wonderful Kate White, who's a dear friend of mine to this day. And it was just such an accepting, loving, open-minded environment. And so I felt welcome there, which was a really nice feeling. And when you feel welcome and supported, you also then thrive. So I
Right.
felt just like I kind of came alive in this environment. And Cosmo at the time was the number one monthly magazine in the world. It had been for years. I don't believe it is now. It's, magazines have really changed in the last 5 years or so.
Sure.
But so people would send all sorts of books. And when I was at NYU, we studied mostly literary fiction, but at Cosmo, every sort of book was sent to us, romance and thrillers and literary fiction. And so I just learned so much about how publishing works, but it did not have that effect on me where I thought, well, I don't want to write. It actually inspired me to think, well, look at all these books. Like, so many people I know are writers, like, oh, I'll never write a book, it's too hard to write. And it is a hard thing to do. But I'll walk into a giant Barnes and Noble or giant bookstore like Tattered Cover or Powell's or something like that, and I look around and think, well, look at all these books. And it seems that almost seems easier to me. Like, well, if all these people can do it, I can do it, And because I don't think I'm the brightest person out there, or the best writer in the world, but I believe I am a smart person and a good writer and a hardworking writer, and I know how to tell a story and create interesting characters. So I give it my best and do my best. And those years in the magazine industry inspired me to do better. And so that's what I started doing.
John, sometimes you read a book and it's a great book, and you appreciate the story, you connect with the characters, and it's a good experience. And then another time you'll read a book, and this really goes for genre fiction especially, and you get the feeling that the writer is a real fan of the genre and of the genre conventions, and everything that kind of makes up what where this book fits in the world. In reading Her Last Affair, I can tell that you're a real fan of thrillers and psychological suspense, and it's just so smartly put together and so well crafted. You can tell that you're a fan of it. Where does your love of this type of story come from?
Well, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate that. What's funny is I never really think my books always get categorized as thrillers and suspense, and I guess apparently they are. But I just try to write a story, and I go back to that letter I received by mistake, that in-house note that said I can barely make it to page 60, and I feel really badly for anyone who has to read the whole thing. And I think, as painful as that was at the time, it was what do teachers call it? A teachable moment. Is that what they
Right.
call it? It was a teachable moment for me as a writer. And I have the letter still. It's in my den, tucked inside one of those books I used to make as a kid. And I keep that letter in mind because I never want anyone to have that feeling. And so I try from page one, paragraph one, sentence one, to create a question in the reader's mind that's going to pull them along. And in the case of Her Last Affair, the first sentence is, every marriage has its secrets. And I want that, this kind of simple way to say that is the hook, but I want to pull the reader in and invite them in. Every marriage has its secrets, to wonder, what are the secrets of this person's marriage? What are, it's to say that is kind of a statement, and so it presents a mystery and a question. But I also start with character. I would say that this book, Her Last Affair, tells the story of three seemingly separate characters.
Right.
One is the woman, Skyla Hall, who ran an old drive-in movie theater with her husband for nearly 50 years. And a few nights before their golden anniversary, he dies in a freak accident. And a year later, she decides to rent out the spare cottage on her property that's under this tattered old drive-in movie screen to a mysterious stranger. Then second character is seemingly disconnected 1,000 miles away, a woman named Linnell, who's in an unhappy marriage. She's been, quote, canceled for a questionable photo from her youth that turned up on the social media. So she got fired from her job. And her marriage is kind of boring. She's about to turn 50. And she hears one morning in a Facebook message from her very first love. And he says, I've been thinking about you for years. And they begin engaging in this online affair. And then again, seemingly disconnected, the third character is a man named Jeremy, who's kind of a failed writer who's unhappy with the way he looks, and uh, he gets an assignment to go cover a restaurant, to write a restaurant review in Providence, which is the town, the place where he experienced his first great love and first great heartbreak. And when he's back in town, this woman broke his heart horribly, but he works up the nerve to look her up. So it's three characters. So I really started the book with character more than thinking about plot. And they seem very disconnected. But then halfway through the book, through a series of twists, the book turns then into the second half much more of a thriller, with that pace of a thriller and the surprises of a thriller. So I would say it's a blend of genres. So I think about character-driven suspense and thriller, and kind of an homage to film noir and movies in general because of the drive-in movie setting.
So as you said that you begin with character, and you have the idea of these three characters. Did you have any idea where the story was going when you began? And I guess the underlying question that's kind of underpinning that is, do you consider yourself, in the writing community, we love to put people in one of two camps, either pantsers, writing by the seat of your pants, or plotters, people that really work out the details of the story before they ever start drafting it, and develop a roadmap of sorts. Do you consider yourself falling into one of those two camps?
I fall into a mix of both because I kind of have loose ideas, and then they were always changing and evolving. Then I scrap out on a piece of paper one direction, but then when I get there, it doesn't feel right. It's very instinctual for me. Like, I have these ideas. I wake up in the middle of the night. I think, oh, this is what it should be. And then when I write it, if it doesn't feel right, it's all about needing to feel right for me. And sometimes you have this great idea and you try to write it, and if it doesn't feel right, the words just literally stop coming, and I get really frustrated. So in terms of your question about this book, there's always a blend of influences with all my books. Like, with Strange But True, it's about a family that loses their son after his high school prom. And as I said, my sister passed after her high school prom. And so there was obviously that sort of larger inspiration. With Help for the Haunted, I grew up in the same town as the couple who were the basis of The Conjuring. Do you know those
Yeah.
movies, The Conjuring? Well, I grew up with them, and I got asked to go back to town. I used to see them as a kid in church on Sundays, at the grocery store, and they were so spooky and scary to me. They hunted demons, and as a kid, so I went back to town, and I was asked to. They made a quilt, the librarians, and very nicely, and they honored any writer from the town. They put your name on this quilt, and there weren't a lot of writers in the town. It was me and mainly this woman who was the ghost hunter. She was much older now. We're standing next to each other, posing for a picture for the town paper. And it's a bubble over my head. If anyone could have seen it, it would have said, "When I was a little kid, you scared the crap out of me." So I just had the idea, like, what would it be like to be the child of a demonologist? And because I had memories, I didn't write it so much about them, but my memory as a kid, how I felt seeing them in town. And so that's how I came to write Help for the Haunted. And Her Last Affair was a mix of influences. I just was in the beginning writing these character pieces, and I knew I wanted to write something noirish. And also a bit funny. I always think my books, I put a little bit of dark humor in them, and then I say to my editor, "Isn't it hilarious?" And she's like, "No, not really. You have like these orphan girls and murdered parents." But this time she said, "John, I have to tell you, it is really, really funny in parts." And so I was really thrilled about that. But I also, when I would go home to see my mom, to visit her, I passed this old sign off the road for a sign that says Rocky Point Drive-In, and it's an old abandoned drive-in movie theater. And every time I pass it, I just would stare at it and just think those what if questions. Who owned it, and what if it had been owned by this couple? And so I started researching online abandoned drive-ins, and there are so many around the country, and the images are so beautiful and evocative. And actually, we made video we're going to share on social media, on my Instagram, coming in the coming weeks, of all these different beautiful images that I had found. And they're just haunting, like the tattered screens, the bent speaker poles, the screens reaching skyward. They're just dramatic, and it just seemed like so ripe for like a great story. And so I had love on my mind a lot, because I would say I wouldn't call it a love story, but I'd say it's a story about love, and about three characters who are all searching for love and reconnecting with their past. And so I don't know. I just thought, what if it was owned by a couple for 50 years? What if the husband died before their anniversary? What if she took in a stranger? And then I was off and running, and I wanted to be a story. I wanted it to be a story about the power of love to impact our lives for both good and bad. And I hope that's what I did. And then weirdly, after all the noir crazy stuff that happens, the very last minute has quite a happy ending, which I'm thrilled to hear from readers too.
In her last affair, the beginning, and I know exactly what you're talking about, the shift that happens about halfway through the book, where it kind of morphs from one sort of story into another, but it's done in such a way that I've been thinking all morning about the words that I would use to describe it. But the beginning of the book is a bit of a slow burn. And I love that. That I don't mean that as to insult the book at all, because I love stories like that. I love to get to know the characters, to really feel like that I'm forming a relationship with the characters, and I don't mind that. That the plot is secondary in the beginning of a book. I really want to know the characters, because as I understand them and their motivations, then when the plot elements really kick in, I'm all in with them because I understand the characters more. Was that a conscious effort on your part, or were you as the writer kind of getting to know the characters yourself, and then you got to a point where it just made sense for these other things to start happening? How does that character development and the shift into a more plot driven stage of the book, how does that shift happen for you?
I just think for me, if things, and I'm speaking for me, so I don't want to, I'm not saying anything negative about other thrillers that work this way, but for me, if I have a really strong sense of character, I'm just so much more invested. When something starts with the plot and someone's, instantly, running through the woods, being chased, and not that that's not compelling, but if I don't know the characters, I'm just less engaged. And so for me, it's about kind of putting the pieces in place and then ratcheting it up. And really, all the hints are there that create a mystery, where Skyla starts saying right away about her marriage having secrets, so that plants the question. Then she rents her extra cottage out to this man, and you instantly wonder, who is this guy? And then I feel like when we move to Linnell, I joke with my editor, it feels like we moved to Tom Perrotta territory, because we're in kind of a suburban house and a marriage with a woman who's in an unhappy marriage, and she starts having this online affair. And I had fun with that, because she just had her husband convinces her to have their house redone, and she hates the way it's been redone. And there's a lot of humor there, and also her sort of awkwardness about having this weird sexual relationship. Like, there's a line that says something like, there's a lot of people in this world who are experts at playing it with themselves in front of a laptop. Linnell was not one of them. For her, she's a mom, but she's also like trying to connect sexually for the first time with this guy from her past who she really loved years ago. So anyway, that's why I started with character. But I did need Hank. I knew, because part of the big question in the beginning for the reader too is, how do these stories connect? And then, as you and I both said, they do halfway through. But I wanted to say to the reader, trust me, this is all part of one thing. So I had this idea, because it's set primarily at an old drive-in, to use movie quotes to start each chapter. And the quotes, they're movie quotes of films that once played on the screen at the drive-in. And the quotes act as clues to the mystery of the book and hints at what's about to come in the chapter, either tonally, thematically, plot-wise, character-wise. So it's a fun puzzle piece for the reader, because the clue gives you a feeling. And whether it's like a classic like Casablanca, or a more sinister movie like Psycho or The Shining, or kind of forgotten 80s fluff like Cannonball Run or Mannequin, or they're all these great. So it's kind of a movie lover's dream, and like because there are all these great film references, but the film quotes act as clues to the mystery of the chapter they're about to read. So, and it's also creates a cohesion, or was my intention to show the reader, even though these feel like separate stories, they're all part of one story. It kind of gives it a vessel, I guess, or something in which to live, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. When you're hearing this episode, Her Last Affair is available everywhere. We're going to have links to it in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon if you want to hold the paper in your hand, or Kindle edition, or audiobook. However you like to read, you can grab it in any form, but also visit your local bookstore. You're gonna this episode is going to air on release day for the book, and go support local books. We need to. It's been a tough time for booksellers over the last couple of years, and let's try to do our part to make sure that these bastions of hope stay open. And I know you've had a lot going on with bookstores, especially for the launch of this book. Can you tell people a little bit about what's going on there, John?
Oh, thanks so much for bringing that up, Hank. So we are doing something very exciting, which is an in-person event, which will be nice, but it's also streaming. We've partnered with 40 independent bookstores around the country. So let me explain. The Academy Award nominated actress Amy Ryan, who people know probably most recently from Only Murders in the Building, which was on Hulu. She starred opposite Steve Martin Short, Selena Gomez. She also was a star of The Office, of The Wire, and she was twice nominated for a Tony, once nominated for an Oscar for her role in Gone Baby Gone. So people really know and love Amy Ryan, and she starred in the film adaptation of my novel Strange But True, which is currently streaming on HBO Max. It's a fantastic cast. It's Brian Cox from Succession, Margaret Qualley, Nick Robinson from Maid, and Amy Ryan. And Amy has generously offered to host a conversation with me at New York City's Symphony Space, which is a very fancy, nice place. I'm honored. When I moved to the city in my dad's tractor trailer, if someone said that this night would be happening, I probably wouldn't have believed them. But but anyway, we're going to do it in front of a live audience, but we're also partnered with, as I said, 40 independent bookstores around the country. And if any reader who orders a copy of Her Last Affair from the store, any of those 40 stores will be given a unique access code to stream the event virtually as it's happening. And then they can watch it after the fact too, with the code at their convenience, but you can live stream it too. So the list of stores I've been sharing on my social media, which is on Instagram, it's just at John Searles, my name, and on my Facebook, which is John Searles Author. But Hank, I can send you the list too. I don't know how you share these things, but
absolutely, I'd be glad to put that in the show notes of the episode for sure.
Yeah, I'd be honored and thrilled for people to come. It's going to be a really fun night because Amy is really funny and kooky. Sorry, funny and spooky and smart. I can combine smart and kooky to smooky. Anyway, she's just really wonderful. And we met on the set of Strange But True, and we've just kept in touch. Mostly we talk a lot about books over email, and we've had lunch, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful, very accomplished woman, but really down to earth and a big reader. And so that's great. And then I just found out too that I've booked a Today Show segment coming up, which I'm really excited about as well. So there's a lot going on. Oh, and then a week after the book comes out, we're doing something with Jodi Picoult, the writer, where it's called I Read It in a Week Book Club. So it's actually a little bit more than a week, but the book comes out on March 22nd, and then on March 31st, we are doing something, a virtual event called the I Read It in a Week Book Club. So if people want to get their copy, come to the Amy Ryan event, and then tune in with Jodi and I to chat about the book. I'll send you all the information, Hank, as I have it, and I'll also post it on my social media accounts and things. So.
Absolutely. We'll be happy to plug all of that into the show notes of the episode. Her Last Affair, when you're hearing this, available everywhere today. Go grab your copy and get in and watch the the Q&A session is going to be fantastic. John, this has been so much fun talking about the books and writing. If people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they connect with you online?
I'm trying to be a little more active on social media than I because sometimes I get lost in writing, but lately I've been really posting quite a bit on Instagram, which is again at JOHNSEARLES, and on Facebook. And then people can also just go to my website, which is john-searles.com, and find me. And Hank, I just want to say thank you to you, because really what you do, supporting writers and really having these detailed, in-depth conversations is so meaningful, because writers, we all work so hard on these books, and a lot of times things are like a one-sentence review on Goodreads or Amazon, those are wonderful too, but it's really nice to have somebody take the time and talk about a book and the craft of writing. So I just really want to say a big thank you to you.
Well, thank you for taking time to come on the show, John. This has been so much fun, and please, let's do it again.
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope to see you. All right.
Absolutely.